Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, IMG Support Australia. From today onwards, I'm going to discuss a few things about how to navigate the Australian healthcare system, especially for international medical graduates. In that, I'm starting today about my journey to become a practicing doctor in Australia, which will give you a lot of motivational content. Because as you know, it's pretty hard to get used to a new system from after you being trained in a different country. And especially if you have done so many exams back home, and then if you have to do them again and again in a new country, that's a bit of a big ask. Okay, so let's discuss how we did it, how I did it, and then individual scenarios about your journey would be a bit different. It's because depending on how you come to Australia in the first place, and then what sort of exams you have to do, and how many years of experience you have, and there's many other things. We'll discuss one by one, but we'll make the basis to this discussion as my journey to navigate Australian medical system. Okay, let's start. First of all, I came to Australia in 2005 briefly, and then I went back again after 3 months of stay here, and then come back again in 2006. So I'm here since the year 2006. During 2006, I came to Australia, especially to South Australia, to join the University of Flinders, or Flinders University, as a PhD candidate. So I was a student. I was a PhD student when I first come to Australia. With a background of having an MBBS medical degree in Sri Lanka, and then internship in Sri Lanka, a few months of post-intern work in the hospital, in a major hospital in Sri Lanka. After that, I was a lecturer in a leading university in Sri Lanka. At the same time, I was doing part-time general practice close to the university for 3 years. So my background is like 4 or 5 years of clinical experience in Sri Lanka, plus internship in Sri Lanka, and then working as an academic in Sri Lanka. So that's the original background. Then in between, I had a master's degree in Norway. So 2 years of non-clinical work, but medical research, like cancer biology. And then I came to Australia in 2005 briefly to visit a lab in Flinders University as a visiting scholar. So I had 3 months of research experience in Australia, 2 years of research experience in Norway. So by that time, I had a bit of a gap of, say, 2 years of clinical gap. Okay, so that's the background. With that, I came to Australia. Unfortunately, no one has informed me, or I was ignorant probably, or I was not searching for it to see how many years I can stay in Australia without doing clinical before I decide to go back to clinical, which is a question which I didn't have at all during that time. And no one probably highlighted it to me too. So therefore, I was continuing as a PhD student. So as you can understand, my clinical gap will extend. Anyway, I was doing my PhD in Flinders University, working part-time as a associate lecturer or a demonstrator for the Flinders University as well, teaching anatomy and physiology there for the medical students, and teaching in problem-based learning curriculum. Like the medical students there, like now they study medicine in that way under that curriculum. So I was teaching part-time for PBL. So I was a PBL tutor or problem-based learning tutor, and demonstrated for Department of Anatomy in Flinders. And later on, I was an associate lecturer for University of Flinders. So that's my background. With that background, I was doing my PhD studies from 2006 to 2009. So 3 years of vigorous research studies, a lot of interesting work on brain and behavior. Like I was doing neurophysiology, neuroanatomy work at Center for Neuroscience in Flinders University, which is a very prestigious institute, and a lot of new knowledge being sort of produced, and a lot of research has been done. So that is where I was studying for my PhD. Interesting work. And towards the end of the PhD, though, I felt like, okay, I should do my AMC qualifications, because you will be sort of targeting your next step. So in my view, what I had in my mind was, okay, I'll get my PhD, and then I'll apply for permanent residency based on my PhD work, like a scientist, as a scientist, which is what I did. As a scientist, I applied for a permanent residency. After that, I'll go towards clinical, which was my plan, and which is what I did. Unfortunately, I didn't realize by that time my clinical gap will slowly increase. So by the time I finished my PhD, 2009, so 6 years of non-clinical work, 5 to 6 years. But in that, I had a lot of clinical teaching and clinical research, or paraclinical research. So I did my AMC part 1 in 2009, probably around September, October 2009, and I got through. I'll tell you a few examples of few tips and tricks for part 1 students, part 1 candidates here. Because I was a teacher, or I was teaching for medical students, I was teaching a lot of units for the medical student at that time, PBL units like brain and behavior, circulatory system, respiratory system, genetics. I can't remember the name of the topic, like the name of the unit, but it's like pregnancy, and then about genetics. There was another topic I did, brain and behavior, as I said. In that, there's a lot of psychiatry and a lot of neurology was covered, and then musculoskeletal system. There's so many sort of topics which I learned while I was teaching to the medical students. So it was good background information for me to get ready for my AMC exam. At the same time, then I did some homework. After working in the university, you come home and study. So I did study the AMC part 1 books. There were 2 books, like the blue and purple. Those 2 books, plus some of the recall MCQs. And then I did go through X-rays and ECGs specifically. The rest of it is like you just go through. I didn't do a lot of Mertha, but a lot of people advise to sort of go through the Mertha general practice book as well. So you could make use of those sort of information for your studies too. But my topic content today is about giving some motivational stuff for you too, because as you can understand, so I had to go through a different path to most of the others, because I was a research student here. While doing research, or while concentrating mostly on the research and teaching, I did my AMC preparation. So I got through the AMC part 1. Then when you try to apply for medical jobs, I think at that time, if I was serious enough, I could have get a job still. But when you apply for different clinics with the CV. There's no guidance, no one telling you what to do. So you decide and do it yourself. I don't think I was familiar to navigate with APRA and AMC and all these things at that time, but I did the exam with the others who were around in Adelaide at that time, but didn't have a lot of guidance to say, okay, this is your path, this would be the better way, and things like that. Anyway, then I decided to apply for different jobs, clinical, non-clinical, like lecturing jobs and hospital jobs. I think two universities actually replied to my CV. One was University of Wollongong in Sydney, and then the other one was La Trobe University in Bendigo. So that's how I ended up being a lecturer, because I got offers from both of those universities, but I had interview with both, and then I decided not to go to Wollongong, but come to Bendigo, to the University of La Trobe. That's how I ended up being a lecturer in University of La Trobe in Bendigo. So by that time, I had my part 1 through. I always, you time to time do English, so that's not a problem for a person who's living in Australia. But what I didn't find was a job to start with in clinical settings. So that's why I started in university, and I still keep looking for options in clinical side. So while working as a lecturer in La Trobe University in Bendigo, I decided to do the part 2 exam. So I just joined the Bendigo Hospital, not as a working HMO or anything. I applied for Bendigo Hospital, but I didn't get any responses. Then I heard there is a clinical case discussion group in Bendigo Hospital, which was run by a local GP, a lady GP who ran that class. But I think it was funded and supported by the Bendigo Bendigo Hospital. Actually to support IMG doctors who were already working in Bendigo Hospital. Doctors who had part 1 and then who work as HMOs or registrars. And then to support them, they had this class. I think every Friday evening, there was a class run by this GP. So someone asked me to join that class. So I went there and joined that class. So we were practicing clinical scenarios with this GP for a while, once a week. So that's the first starting step to go towards the clinical practice. And then the people then in that group, there were a lot of doctors who were already working in Bendigo Health. And then they were applying for their AMC Part 2. That's when I also decided to apply for AMC Part 2. So I applied for AMC Part 2 exam while not working as a clinical doctor, but working as a lecturer, but had some links with the Bendigo Health by means of this weekly class. So I did my AMC Part 2 in 2012, I think, because I came to Bendigo in 2011 and then continued as the lecturer and joined that class. Few months into that class, I felt like, okay, I could also do this clinical exam. And then I applied for the AMC Part 2 exam. My Part 2 exam what happened? Let me think about it. So when I applied for Part 2 exam, they didn't give a date at the beginning because I was not working as a clinical doctor. Probably that's the reason from AMC maybe. And then someone in that group or some other doctors who were talking to me suggested maybe do a bridging course. Those days, AMC used to give their AMC clinical exam dates based on if the candidate is registered for a bridging course, they will offer you a date for the clinical exam. So I decided to apply for a bridging course. And then after application, I got a bridging course from Monash University. Again, Department of General Practice in Monash University was running a bridging course. This was in Fern Tree Gully campus. I think the local doctors who live in Australia already should know that there is this campus of Monash University, which offer the IMG's bridging course. There was another bridging course for international medical graduates. That was PMCV, postgraduate. What's it called? Postgraduate Medical Institute of Victoria or something. PMCV, I'll put some links here. So PMCV is still there, which is supporting the international doctors or the national doctors to get their postgraduate qualification. So they also ran a bridging course, but the difference was PMCV course was costly, but longer, 3 months course. I think it's $15,000 or something that time in year 2012. And then the Monash course was shorter and cheaper. I think it was 5 weeks course for $5,000. So that's the course I did, which was a very good bridging course, which has a lot of case scenarios discussion or the preparation for AMC Part 2 exam, which is like clinical scenarios every 8 minutes, timed clinical scenarios, and then you do mock exams and things. So that's that course. The other PMCV course, of course, take the international doctors to hospitals as well, briefly, for 1 or 2 days. Monash didn't have that experience. Anyway, I did the Monash course. When I registered for the Monash course, then I applied again for the AMC. They straight away gave me an exam date. So that's how I did the AMC Part 2. I did the Part 2 exam in Adelaide, year 2012. Unfortunately, I didn't get through. I was very sad situation. I was actually almost borderline. I passed 9 cases out of 16. If you pass 10 cases, you will be borderline pass those days. That means if you get a borderline pass, you will have to do a resit of 4 cases and then pass 2. Because the AMC clinical exam those days was, you got 16 cases of this 8 minutes duration. Out of those 16, you had to pass 12 to pass. And then you should, of course, pass your ONG and pediatrics, at least 2 cases. At least 1 case, I think, 1 case each. If you don't pass ONG and peds, although you get 12 cases, you won't be going through. You will get a resit. Anyway, I got only 9 cases out of 16, almost borderline. You can't say borderline. Borderline is 10. So it was making me down a little bit because I was very confident with those case scenarios and discussion groups and things, even Monash bridging course. I thought I could clear this exam. And then when I failed, I think I rang someone to say, okay, just to share my sort of grief, I rang someone. Then they told me, if you don't touch patients and if you are not having clinical sense, or if you not seen patients for a while, this would be hard for you to pass the clinical exam. Similar notes were given by some of my colleagues in Sri Lanka too. They said, "Oh, we did try to go to clinical arena. I did the MD part 1, but I didn't get through. I heard that you are doing clinicals. It shouldn't be easy for you." I said, "Okay, we'll see." And for the person who rang me from here, I didn't tell anything, but I just told myself, "Okay, I'll let you know when I do the second attempt." So for the second attempt, these are all motivational content for you guys. If you listen carefully, you will understand how hard it is to go through these hurdles. So for the second attempt, I thought I would take things seriously because, part 1, I just sat the exam with 2 months preparation, got through. Part 2, I thought the same. I know the knowledge, and when I run the clinical scenarios with the other doctors, I don't have any issues. I got differential diagnosis and plans and things. And then I thought, I could clear the part 2, but it was not so. I think the main problem with my part 2, that borderline pass time, was communication. It's not the clinical knowledge, it's not the theory knowledge, but it's more about your communication. How you talk to your role player, how you tell them your diagnosis and differential diagnosis, how you plan your management after talking to them, after discussing with the patients, but get the patient involved in the management. This is what we do now, day in and day out. So that time I didn't know this. So that's where my failure came from. But I learned quickly because I got a nice guy who helped us. I think most of the international doctors, I will do a different video on this, about this person, but most of the international doctors have heard about this person. His name is Dr. Johannes Wenzel, or Dr. Wenzel. So I was lucky enough to join his classes in Monash Medical Center in late 2012 and early 2013. So after I missed my attempt in AMC Part 2, barely, like borderline miss, then I decided to join this guy's classes. So it was interesting experience because Dr. Wenzel runs his classes in Monash Medical Center, which is in Clayton, Monash Clayton campus. People know the geography of Victoria. So I work and live in Bendigo, and then I have to go to Clayton in Melbourne to attend this class. So his classes were run on Thursdays, only one day, Thursday from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m., 5 to 8. And then on a Thursday, I'll be working in Bendigo. On a Thursday, I actually had 2 practical classes, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, 2 hours each. But I was lucky enough to have a good supervisor, good professor who was heading our department in Bendigo. I said to him, I need to go to this Monash class. Then he said, okay, what sort of things you need from me? I said, if you can put both my classes back to back in the morning, and then my fellow lecturer covering the afternoon back to back, then I got a half day free. I can use that half day to go to Monash. My professor agreed, so he gave me that opportunity to go to Monash. So I was finishing my classes at say 1 o'clock. There's no time for me to have lunch. So my wife packed my lunch in a box. So I take the lunchbox in a box and then I put it in my backpack and then jump onto the bus from Bendigo and then take the train from Bendigo City and go by train to Monash. So leave here at 1 o'clock. I will arrive at Monash probably around 4:45, roughly 4:45, 5, just before the class starts. And then the class goes from 5 to 8. And then you jump back on the train from Clayton and then come to Southern Cross, the big train station from Clayton by a metro train. And then you take the speed train to Bendigo, so which take another 2 hours. So that was a Thursday for me, from 1 o'clock up till midnight. So devoting that time to get to this class. But it was so important because a lot of people who watching this video from Australia who already doctors may know this history. And then when I went there, the first day I told Dr. Wenzel, I'm coming from this far. I'm committing a lot of time to come here. I would like to sit on your hot seat, which is like go in front of the audience, like 500 to 600 odd international doctors watching you. And then you do the case scenarios with Dr. Wenzel. And then everyone in the audience will sort of listen and will add their voices or suggestions while you're performing in front of all of them. So I used to do at least one clinical scenario every time I go there, or almost every time. Dr. Wenzel will call me to do one case when I put my hand up. Because it's the volunteer doctors who will be taking the hot seat. So there will be 4 or 5 cases per day, which are recall cases or almost previous AMC cases. And then it was run by Dr. Wenzel, who himself was an AMC examiner at that time. So that's how I practice. At the same time, I should give you a background from Bendigo Health as well. So I was going for these weekly classes. I was doing that for a while. And then I was trying to get some observership, but I didn't manage that time. But I was still keep tapping at the door of Bendigo Health to get some work. Anyway, so for the second time, I just prepare well. And then coming home every day, I was practicing clinical cases with, I was volunteering myself to practice with doctors all over in Australia, kind of like Indian, Bangladeshi, Pakistani, Iranian, so many other doctors from Adelaide, Western Australia, or Brisbane, wherever they are. We practice on Skype those days. Zoom was not big at that time. It was not there, but we were practicing on Skype. So I was role playing, and so the clinical scenarios with many doctors from different parts of Australia. At the same time, I was practicing cases with Dr. Wenzel. His weekly cases were very important. I got boxes full of those cases in my room, and then I also got those cases in ASOC office as well. So I was practicing with him, and then I did the AMC Part 2 again in Sydney. This was in, I think, March or May in 2013. So the Sydney exam, I learned some lessons from Adelaide exams. I didn't take my family with me, and then I went alone and then stayed in a quieter place, not with friends or anything, and then did the exam again. In the Sydney exam, I had a lot of clinical armory in my back, which were sort of sharpened or produced or modified by Dr. Vansal himself. I remember he was talking about to me when I was performing those hot seat scenarios. Hot seat means you sitting on a chair where 600 odd people watching you. And he actually sharpened my armories, as I said, by saying, like he would say, Kirti, don't smile. Why are you always laughing at when patient tell you things, why you laugh or why you smile? You have to show your serious face. You know what does this mean? This is actually going by the emotions of your patient. If you're talking about a cancer, if you're talking about a bad scenario or domestic violence or depression, anxiety, your sort of facial expression should also change as a doctor, which is what he was trying to highlight. He said, don't smile at everything, because that's the nature, like Sri Lankan culture. We do have different cultural things, isn't it? Sri Lankan culture, you would smile at people, not you laughing at them, but it's just to sort of show you a sort of warm sort of attitude. But you can't show warm attitude for a person who's down in the dumps with their mood. Okay, so you have to take serious and you have to show a bit of sad face, that sort of thing. So I learned this. I remember when I did a case in Sydney Children's Hospital. I had this exam, Sydney Children's Hospital. When I did a case on, Breaking Bad news case, that was a case about a patient who was diagnosed with breast cancer. And then from my memory, she had two young daughters, 17 and 19, which I actually gathered from the history when I asked the history from her. And then her sisters, her mom diagnosed with breast cancer. So there's family history, there's BRCA gene, and then there's this serious issue. Now she was diagnosed with breast cancer. So you had to sort of navigate this case. This is when Dr. Wenzel's teaching came into play. So I did the case perfectly, I remember. And then the role play, I think she's a GP herself, general practitioner herself, I guess. And then she touched my hand at the end of the scenario, and she did. We both were almost crying, if you want to know the scenario now. Obviously the role player crying because she was diagnosed with breast cancer. She got young girls, and then I was talking about who are they, and then we have to get their their cancer risk assessed and things like that, and then talking about her family, husband, her job, her mood, a lot of things. And then she was almost crying because for the case scenario, but I was almost crying as the doctor, and then not smiling like this. And then she said at the end of the scenario, she touched my hand, and then she said, "Oh, you did well." Okay, that was a good sort of assessment then and there. So that actually boosts my confidence for a lot of the other cases in Sydney Children's Hospital. I actually got through easily. I can't remember, did I pass almost all the cases, or I probably went down in one case or something. But that was walk in the park kind of exam. So I got through. But what I'm saying is, like, if you have a good preparation, you clear exams very easily. But if you have to you have to learn techniques of exams. So this AMC clinical exam is all about your communication skills, your time management, of course your theory, but you know theory well. So I cleared the AMC part 2 easily in the exam which I sat for the second time. in the Children's Hospitals at the Children's Hospital of Sydney. As I said, one role player told me like that. There's another, I'll give you a few more examples from that exam because it was an interesting exam. I knew that I was clearing the exam so easy. And in the another scenario was about COPD. Case was a COPD case. I think 2 GPs were asking question. One was a role player, the other one is the examiner. And then I told, like history, examination, investigation, management. In the management long term, I said to him, okay, this guy got COPD. I teach him about like smoke cessation and pit line and all this. And then I said, I would look for his flu vaccine and, sorry, not COVID those days, flu vaccine and pneumonia vaccine. And then the examiner immediately turned at me and said, you are the first one who mentioned about this pneumonia vaccine. Okay, so this is all practice from Dr. Wenzel. Plus, you see the book there, the AMC clinical exam book, that one here, this book. So I just practiced that book again and again. There is a good case about COPD in this book. In that, it talk about your immunization as the management, like long-term management. So day in, day out, these days as GPs, we always check whether our COPD patients are up to date with their immunization. What are the immunization we're checking? Flu vaccine, COVID vaccine, of course, now, and then the pneumonia vaccine. There are guidelines about which pneumonia vaccine and how frequent. I don't go into those details, but it's like after 65, recently changed it to 70. For the free vaccine, of course, those things. Anyway, when I mentioned about the pneumonia vaccine, the light sort of went on the eyes of the examiner because he thought, this guy knows his stuff. So that's another example from Sydney exam, my successful exam. There's another one I will tell you, and then I'll stop about this. There was another case about pediatric case with fever. I cleared all the pediatric cases, 3 cases, passed all 3 in that exam. And then in the ped case, what did he ask? Anyway, there was a febrile child, and then you did all the, office test and everything. In the office test, I just mentioned about, okay, I'll do a urine ward test. And then the examiner said, you are one of the candidates who mentioned about this, not many mentioned this. So they were interested about this urine ward test, like a child with a fever, you just exclude a UTI. It's a simple thing. So those little points gave me a hint to say, okay, you are clearing this exam. So I successfully did the part 2, but this is not ending as a success story as such as yet. So I think because of the time constraint, I'll stop here and I'll come back to you with the part 2. Okay, guys, have a good day.